Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be going through something that I previewed a little bit during my last video. We created that UI. If you remember, we created that sort of sign-in form with a create new user, sign in with email and password, sign in with Twitter and Facebook. Today what I want to do is actually connect that to a real backend service, and what we're going to be using is Firebase. The reason I've chosen Firebase is quite simply because it's backed by Google. It's extremely useful. The documentation is really good. It's free to test out. If you do happen to build the next Facebook, you might be looking at some charges, and you probably want to head over to start using your own backend. But as an enthusiast and as someone who's starting out with making apps, it's actually extremely useful. You can do notifications, sign-in authentication, backend storage, database storage, and it's extremely useful. And you guys are going to see all of that and more. So, welcome back, and get strapped in. Let's get going. All right, so let's dive back into the code, you guys. I think since I last posted that video on YouTube, the tutorial, I may have changed a couple of things. I refactored a small amount of the code by just defining a duration for the animation here on top. I implemented this method here to change the page, but that's it, right? Nothing much of substance has changed. I just saw an opportunity to simplify the code. You'll recognize our screen here. This is exactly where we left off. And what we want to do is let's get connected to Firebase. So the first thing that we'll want to do is get the Firebase packages. And for what we're going to do today, we need two of those packages. The first one being Firebase Authentication. So go back to your pub.dev, as we're becoming more and more familiar with, and copy the dependency in your pubspec.yaml file. You'll post that. And while we're at it, let's go right back and get the Firebase core, I believe it's called, which is also something that we want. Firebase core, there it is. Installing, grab the dependency, paste that here, git, or type it into your terminal, pubget. And then what we're going to do is we're going to restart the app if you've already got yours running, because after you add new packages, you have to let your, notably I found for when I'm using iOS, it has to install using CocoaPods, and that takes a while. So as usual, my computer's pretty slow, so I'll come back to you guys after it's done restarting. I restarted my app, and I got this immediate error thrown here in my console, in the console of my Android Studio. And the reason for this is because we haven't completed setup. So let's go ahead and do that. Go back to the Firebase auth page, and that's where we'll find some of the setup on the README tab. This will give us the process to go ahead and set up our app for use. So the first thing here is add the class path to the Android build.gradle file. Go ahead and copy this line here. And then go, and you notice you have to be careful with this build.gradle file because there's actually multiple. So we have to be careful about the path. So it's project Android build.gradle. Okay, so your project Android build.gradle. And then it says to add this class path. Go ahead and save. I get a notification here at the bottom that there's actually a newer version, 4.3.3, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that manually here. Okay, go back. What's the next step? Add the apply plugin to the project Android app build.gradle file. So as I just mentioned, there's multiple build.gradle files. This one is in the app folder. Add this to the bottom. So copy and paste this. So now we have to go app build.gradle and just go to the bottom, hit that, hit save. Okay. That seems fine. And now they're just going into more details about how to use it. So now that we've done this part, let's go ahead and go to firebase.google.com. If you don't have a Google account, you're going to need to create a Google account. I would think almost all of you would probably have one, but go ahead and create a Google account and click on Create Project. So now we can enter a project name. I'm just going to call it Connection Video. Here, depends how paranoid you guys are. I'm like medium. I'd say I'm medium on the paranoia scale. But I'm going to go ahead and deactivate the Google Analytics. Just the whole tracking you thing. I'm not sure where I stand on that, but feel free to leave it if you don't mind sharing some of the analytics so they can improve their app for future users. Okay, now that we've created the project, we need to add the apps. So go ahead and click on iOS. Depending on what you guys are using, I think most of you will want to configure for both iOS and Android. So now what we need is this iOS bundle ID. And the way to find this is to go into your Flutter project, click on the iOS, and the way I usually do this is I'll just open this in Finder, open the workspace in Finder, and then I'll open this in my Xcode. And there it's pretty easy to see. I think you can find it I think it's listed in some of these like if in one of these like config files, but this is the easiest way I found to find it. Once you're in Xcode, click on the file in the left side menu, click on the project name, and then you'll see what is this bundle identifier. And I'm going to go ahead and blur that out for the video probably because it contains my full name information, but copy and paste this bundle identifier. I'm sorry, where are we? And click here. This is optional, so just hit register app. And the next thing we're going to do is download what is called a Google Service Info.plist. One thing that's important to take note of when you do this, it's going to go into your downloads over here. And if you have already one of these in there, say from a former project, it will increment so as not to reuse the same file name twice. So you need to make sure that this is just Google Service Info.plist and there's not a 1 added on or a 2 depending on how many of these you may have. So now it says move this into the root of your Xcode project. So at the root under the application, just under the info.plist, we're going to add this. So with Xcode still open up the runner folder, and then go ahead and drag that. I'm just going to put it right on top. Copy items if needed, add to targets, finish. I'm not sure if it's necessary, but I'm going to hit a Command B and just rebuild and let that kind of work in the background. Let's go back to the Firebase, hit next. You can ignore the rest of this because we've already done that using the Flutter setup. Continue to console. So that will be fine. Now let's go ahead and add another app for Android. This should be the same thing, the same name, package name, but if you want to find where this is located, then you have to go into your Flutter project and you'll find that here under the application ID in your app level build.gradle file. This is again optional. Hit register app. It's going to give us another file to download, Google services.json. Let's go ahead and download that. And that, again, we're going to pay attention to where we place this. It's inside the app folder. So let's go back here. Google services.json and put it in the app folder. Hit OK. Save. And now what we're going to do is restart. I'm going to close Xcode because it seems like that's finished. And we're going to restart our app. I'll come back to you guys when my computer has finished rebuilding and relaunching the app. Looks like everything is fine. Everything has worked according to plan. If you see this in your console, that means things are working here. Configure the default Firebase app and the debug service listening, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that seems to be good. Let's go ahead and close these files that we're no longer going to be messing around with, the build Gradle, the pub spec, all of that. So what are we trying to achieve here? I'm going to propose that we start firstly with creating a new user, because we don't have any users at this moment. If we go back here and we finish off all of this, which we don't need to worry about, we can go into authentication and we'll see that we have no users because we haven't even set up a way to sign in. So you can click either on the blue button or click on this tab. And I think this may turn into a multi-video series because of the time that it takes, and I don't want to be putting out hour-long videos all the time. So what I want to cover first is the simple email password combo. So go ahead and enable that, hit save. Okay, and that's it. Now our apps are ready to accept new users using email and password. So what are we trying to achieve? We're trying to sign up a new user. So let's look at our sign up screen and let's go there in the code as well. So create login. One thing that we didn't cover in the first video was making sure that these fields have the proper values in them. For example, when you make the user retype the password twice, we should have some checks on that. And thankfully in Flutter, this is relatively easy to do using something that's a widget called a text form field. So what I want to do is change our 3 text fields into text form fields for the username, which is actually going to be an email, right? And the 2 passwords. So just so we don't have any confusion, this is an email, right? Okay, so that first part's pretty easy. We've changed just the name, but we have to add functionality now. That's actually going to make sure that this works. What I want to do is initialize some variables to store the 3 strings that are going to be typed in: email, password, and password confirm. And they have no value to begin with. You'll find a property here inside of a text form field called a validator. And that takes as an argument the value of the text field, the current value. And what it does is returns a string with an error message if there is a problem. So let's go ahead and say if the email value is empty, then return, this field is mandatory, just as an example. Otherwise you can return null if there is no issue. So what I want to do is just copy this for each one of our text form fields, except this one's going to be password value. It can be anything, but just to be clear about our intention. Showing intention in coding is very important, right? So it can't be empty. Let's put another one saying if password value dot length is less than 8. Then we'll return password must be at least 8 characters, for example. Right? And then let's go down to the confirm password field. And on this one, we'll say if password, oh, sorry, I gotta change the name of this variable. Password confirm value is not equal to password. So if it's not equal, we have to say that passwords must match. Okay, so that's all good, except for the fact that we're not actually changing these. I just declared these variables, email password and password confirm. So we actually need to implement the onChanged methods to set those using setState. So email will be equal to the text value. Okay, so now we're actually going to, every time someone types in a password or their email, it's being stored in our 3 variables that we've just created. And we've added some validation to the fields. But how do we activate that validation? And that is where a form comes into play. So what we want to do is wrap the whole page in a form. Or you could just wrap this container or this column. I don't think it matters as long as we've wrapped our form fields. And what we're going to use also is what we call a form key, which is a global key form state type, and initialize it. And you pass this key into the form, and this form key will be able to access the state, and you'll see in a second that it can trigger these validation methods. So let's go down to where we hit save and create a button. On tap. And here we can use that form key, get the state, and then validate. And that returns either true or false, whether those validation methods that we implemented on the text form fields return a null or return a string value with the error message. Okay, so then what we want to do is save the form, and then go on and use the values. But before we go ahead and do that, what I want to do is just test our validation. So let's save this, and let's just hit save. Okay, so those are actually really hard to read. So we can change the style. We need to change the color on those error messages because I can't even read those. So where is our input decoration error style? Okay, so now you're seeing our errors. One thing I do want to do is there is a way to check to make sure that the format of the email actually matches a real email. And that's something that I found online. I'm just going to copy and paste it here, and then we'll look at it. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Like I said, I found this online. The important thing to note is that it uses these patterns. So this is actually defining a pattern. It can using A through Z in small case, A through Z in uppercase, and 0 through 9. Without accepting these values, they cannot be used, I think. I'm not 100% sure on this. Then you need the @ symbol, and then there needs to be another, this would be the website, right? There would be like @Gmail, and then you have the dot, and then you need either a com or a org or a net. So this is just a pattern. And what we're doing here is using this type here that's already defined in Flutter or in Dart, reg expression. You can see whether there's a match or not. And if there's not, at the bottom, we're going to say this is not a real email, or this is not a valid email. And we'll see what that looks like here. So if I type in Ryan at Google and I hit save, this is not a valid email. But if I type in Ryan at google.com, it's fine because it matches the pattern. Okay? And one thing that I do kind of want to do is, you saw, let's restart this. There's an auto validation that we can enable that I really like to use. So if I'm typing in Ryan, that's it. I'll just type in Ryan and save. This is not a valid email. But if I go ahead and type in at google.com, I want this to go away automatically. So what we can do is keep track of whether or not the user has attempted to save already. So it starts out as false, and then what I do is auto validate save attempted. And if it has been, then it will automatically update as we type, as the user types in. So as soon as the user has entered in something that's valid, they'll know it. All right, so let's restart the app. Ryan, this is not a valid email. And that did not work, and the reason why is because I never changed this value. So once you've hit save, God, that's a stupid mistake. Once you've hit save, do a set state. Oops, that is not the right spot. Set state. Save attempted is true. Yeah, that would help if I do that. So let's do another try. Ryan. Save. Doesn't work. And now it automatically does. And if I do password, it's good. Passwords must match. W-O-R-D. Okay, perfect. All right, so now we have our form validation working, which is sort of annoying to work on, but it's important because we want to know that we're controlling here on our side before sending it to Firebase. We want the data to be good before it gets there because that'll limit the amount of errors that we have to deal with coming back. Okay, the next thing I want to do is create here in our state a function that deals with the creation. Create user, let's just say that. Here we're going to finally make use of the Firebase that we worked on earlier. So let's go ahead and grab the Firebase auth, call it auth, Firebase auth.instance. So grab an instance of the auth, and we're going to use it here, auth.createUser with email and password. So here we're going to pass in an email and a password. Make this a private function. For the moment, we'll just leave it like this. That's not how we're going to eventually implement it. And then we want to create the user. Let's use that down in the save. Where is it? Save. So after this, create user, email is the email, and password is the password. All right. So this actually, if you want to look at this, if you're on a Mac and you hold the command button, you can get the details of what this method entails, the properties, the arguments of the function, and what it returns. And what it returns, you'll see, is a future auth result. So this is an asynchronous function, which means that we can use a .then at the end of the function to access this auth result when it becomes available. So it's not immediately available because it's doing an online, right? It's going out to Google using the internet, and there's the chances that you might not be connected. So this is a way to define a function that is sort of, it's unsure. That's why they call it a future, right? We're expecting something to come back, but we're not sure. Here we have to fill in the email that we passed into the function. And this I'm going to rename as auth result. Okay. So what I want to do is just print the auth result, and there should be a user. There's a user defined in there. Okay. And as I was saying, we don't know if maybe there could be problems. Like maybe there's no internet connection, maybe this email has already been used and the person just forgot. So what we want to do here is catch the error, and then also we're going to print it if there's an error. All right, hit save. So if it's successful, we should see the user. Let's go ahead and add a yay here, because we'll be extremely happy if this works. Or I will be. Hope you guys will be. So if we have done our due diligence, we'll have a yay down here. And if not, we'll have an error. Either way, we'll have something. We're not going to get out of this empty-handed. All right, so I think I typed in ryan@google.com, password. Save. And there's a yay. So that means that what we've done is working. And actually, if we go now to our Firebase console and we click on users, we should see, there it is, ryan@google.com. And it's working, right? Let's go back to the code. What happens if I click on that again? Oh, well, now we've got a problem. Now we've got a error email already in use problem. And that's something that we would like to show our users. So if we go in here where we're catching the error, we can see that what we've printed out is something that's a platform exception. That's the class. So what I want to do is I want to know more about this platform exception. So now you can see, well, I just saw it. There it is, code, message, and details. Those are the 3 available properties. So let's go ahead and let's say print error.code, because I'm thinking that this error email already in use is the code. So let's go ahead and do that. And there we go. So now we know that we can say if error.code is equal to this, let's copy and paste. Well, then I want to show a Cupertino dialog. So let's see if I've done this correctly. Hit save. This email already has an account associated with it. Okay, so that's good enough for that. If it works, instead of saying just yay, well then maybe we'll navigate to a different screen. So let's try it. Okay, I'll need to actually enter a new ryan@gmail.com. It's not my real email, guys. Don't try it. Hit save. Welcome. Well, so we would have to deal with the style. That's not actually the scope of this video. I just want to show you guys what we would do. One issue is we can actually go back, and I don't want the user to be able to go back. So actually, instead of using a navigator.push, we're going to use something that is a navigator.push replacement. This time I'll say john@google.com, password 1. Aha, passwords don't match. Now they match. Now we hit save. And now we're here. Welcome john@google.com. And I'm trying to slide back, and you can't because this actually replaces the login screen. So the user cannot get back. In your apps, you would implement a sign out button, right? And you would be able to navigate back. Okay, so the next thing is if we go to our sign in screen. And as I mentioned before, I'm just going to cover the email and password for this video. And we can dive into some Facebook and Twitter stuff. I have less familiarity with that. So let's just stick with this part first. Let's go to our sign-in screen. It's kind of the same here. We also need to add I think you could define this globally within your app somewhere. I'm not sure what the best practices really define as the best way to do this, but for me, when you go for this instance, it's not duplicating the instance, it's the same one, so you're protected against that from what I understand. Okay, so here we're going to use auth.signin with email and password. Let's just say I'm just going to use shortened versions so there's no confusion between the names of the variables. String m string password. Okay, make this a private method. Find my login. Make this a button. Okay, sign in, email, PW is password. Okay, same thing here. We'll have a dot then. And a dot catch error. Okay, alright, so now we've defined this. What do we want to happen? Actually, if the user signs in, I'm going to actually copy the exact same thing. We'll navigate to the yellow screen that I created. So let's copy that. That sounds good. Auth result. That's because I need to rename this auth result. And the same thing, we have different errors that might occur. So let's copy the creation of the show dialog. I'm thinking the most common error has got to be like wrong password, right? So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and test that theory. This doesn't have, Cupertino hasn't been imported. Now it has. Now we're good. So what I want to do is, first of all test this and see if it works. And let's see what the error is if you put in the wrong email. So I think I did, was it ryan@google.com? We can always check using our Firebase, ryan@google.com. And if I type in the wrong password, like hello, let's see what we get. Error, wrong password, that makes sense. Let's copy this. Replace that. And we'll say the password was incorrect. Please try again. See if that works right away. The password was incorrect. Please try again. And if I type in password, login, there we go. All right, guys, I'm going to close out the video on this high note with this bright yellow screen in the background here. I hope that this was useful to you guys. What we've done in this video, just a little recap, is we added Firebase authentication to our app where it didn't exist. Before, we added form validation on our text form fields just to check to see if passwords matched. We learned a little bit about pattern matching for email addresses. And then we went ahead and we used the Firebase auth. We saw that the users were created, and we saw that they can now sign in successfully. Like I said, in the next video, we'll probably dive into if I can figure out how to do some Facebook and Twitter sign-in authentication. That would be great. That's my goal for the next video. Thanks again for spending time with me here, learning to code. It's really cool making these videos, and I love to read positive comments that you guys are having. Feel free to add comments if you have ideas for future videos. And please do like the video if you liked it, and subscribe too if you would like to get more content. Thanks again, guys. Have a great day.